Weather is about to change a lot over the next few days as Tropical Storm Francine continues to move inland, where it will be posing another threat for tornadoes both today and tomorrow in the southeast. And then eventually, as we go into next week, we're going to be dealing with a large-scale potential for some severe weather across parts of the central and northern plains and back through the Midwest. And in addition to Tropical Storm Francine, we are watching 4 different areas of development in the Atlantic Ocean for the potential for more tropical storms and or hurricanes over the next 7 days. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather over the next 7 days across the entire United States. We will begin with what's happening this morning across the country, and in the southeast, that is where the remnants of Tropical Storm Francine still exist. Overall, this system has become a lot more disorganized as it continues to move inland. We did have a flash flood emergency yesterday in actually New Orleans after we got off air last night. There was some significant flooding in New Orleans. We had several inches of rain. Some areas picked up as much as 8 to 10 inches of rain in a very short period. The good news is that Tropical Storm Francine is continuing to lift to the north, and throughout the day today, it will continue to weaken, and it'll be a tropical depression by sometime this afternoon. The bad news is that we will be watching for the potential for a small-scale tornado outbreak later this afternoon in Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, and we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. It's not a guarantee, but it is something that is a possibility today if thermodynamic weather is essentially in place today. Also, in addition to that, back up in the Northeast, Midwest, and back through much of the Great Plains, things remain pretty quiet. We do have a trough that's back up in the Northwest that did bring some severe weather yesterday to Montana. There will be another chance for severe weather today back up in the Northern Plains, and we'll be watching for a better shot of severe weather as we go into next week, which we will talk more about here in a few minutes. Now, here's what's left of Tropical Storm Francine. Notice it will be a tropical depression later this afternoon back up in northern and central Mississippi. Tropical storm force winds will still be possible in central and southern Mississippi, isolated power outages being a possibility. And then as we go into Friday morning, this thing's going to weaken into a tropical depression and a post-tropical cyclone before it literally just dies out. There's not going to be much left of this after Friday afternoon, so this thing's going to really quickly just fizzle, and after that, we'll be done talking about Francine. But unfortunately, we do have to talk a little bit about Francine because it's not done yet. We do have a couple days of tornado threats existing in the southeast, beginning with today, which is tossing trampolines on tall trees Thursday. We do currently have a slight risk of severe weather in Alabama, Florida, and southwest Georgia, and there's also a marginal threat that goes back up into Tennessee. Notice we also have another marginal and slight risk back up in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming, which that area will be dealing with mostly a wind and hail threat with maybe an isolated tornado or two. But really the more concerning thing today, I think, will be in the southeast, especially in Alabama and Georgia. There is a potential for a tornado outbreak today. It would be a very small scale one, maybe up to 6 tornadoes or something like that. Even then, though, I'm not super confident that we are going to have a tornado outbreak. With how things transpired yesterday, we didn't really see much of a tornado threat even transpire yesterday. We barely even had a tornado warning yesterday, so I don't know if today's really going to transpire, even with the ingredients that are in place. With that said, you do want to be prepared for the tornado threat. There might be a few tornadoes this afternoon or into the early evening, especially if supercells can materialize and start to become more discrete in nature. I don't think this is going to be anything like Beryl in what that produced, but I do think that this could bring the potential again for maybe something like a small-scale tornado outbreak. So make sure you have a tornado action plan ready to go. We might be doing a live stream for this later today on the YouTube channel, so make sure that you are subscribed down below and click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. By the time we go into Flying Fences Friday, that severe weather risk in the northern tier of the country will kind of die out, but over in the southeast, we're going to still be watching the remnants of Francine, bringing another potential for maybe an isolated severe storm or two. The main concern Friday will be damaging winds, but there could also be a potential for maybe an isolated tornado or two. Any tornadoes that develop either today or tomorrow will be mostly brief, but I do think there is a very small chance that we could see a strong tornado today if any tornadic activity does get going. Now, today's tornado threat is going to begin in very far southern Alabama and as well as western Florida this morning. Overall, the tornado threat is really going to be over the next few hours. There could be a couple of tornado warnings, honestly, when this forecast goes out or even when you're watching this forecast. So make sure that you're keeping a close eye on the weather if you're in any of these areas. This tornado threat, though, is mostly going to be through about 9 or 10 o'clock this morning. And then as we go into the afternoon hours, there could still be a low-end threat for a tornado, even in the late morning, even in the early afternoon. But I think when we're going to be really watching for the main concern this afternoon will start probably closer to 3 to 4 o'clock in southeast Alabama and southwest Georgia, and that should go until about 8 o'clock. Now, this threat will be basically anywhere up through about central Alabama and also back through eastern Alabama and as well as in southwestern Georgia, and that's where we could see a few tornadoes. Now, again, it's going to depend on if storms can actually stay discreet and also organized. That's not a guarantee with this particular tropical storm. Once we go into Friday, there will be another low-end threat for maybe an isolated tornado or two. I think the greatest concern will be in northern Alabama, so like in the Huntsville area, we could see a brief tornado. Again, nothing to panic about, just make sure that you're staying weather aware. Here's what the future radar looks like for the rest of today. So again, this is this morning, a few storms coming from offshore going inland. These are the ones that are going to be producing the waterspout potential, and that could lead to a tornado or two as they move inland into parts of Florida. Once we get closer to lunchtime, those storms will start to kind of fizzle out by around 12 o'clock. We'll have another new band of storms attempting to develop back over in southeast Alabama around lunchtime. Again, the question mark is going to be, can these storms stay discreet and separated, or will they be very clustered together and disorganized? If they are very disorganized, I don't see there being much of a need to go live today, but if they do actually organize, this could be a bit more of a concern. So by 3 to 4 o'clock, the HRRR model has storms organizing a lot more near the border of Alabama and Georgia, and they eventually produce the potential for a couple or a few tornadoes as we go throughout the rest of the afternoon into the evening hours, and then eventually after sunset, the threat for any tornadic activity does start to decrease in western Georgia and as well as eastern Alabama. And then once we go into Friday, some new initiation will be possible, but I think Friday overall will be more of a wind threat with maybe some sort of spin up or two back up in northeast Alabama or even parts of Georgia. Now, the remainder of rainfall is going to continue to fall mostly in Mississippi and Alabama. A few inches of rain may be possible in like western Georgia. Overall, though, the most places will see anywhere from 1/10 of an inch of rain upwards of maybe 2 to 3 inches of rain if you're lucky. A few spots in Mississippi you'll see anywhere from 3 to 4 inches of rain as well. I told you that there's a lot of stuff happening in the tropics, and there really is. We actually have 5 different areas that we're looking at across the entire Atlantic Ocean. Obviously, Francine has made landfall, moving inland, not really much of a concern after today. And then we also have a new area of development just off the coast of North and South Carolina. As we go into the weekend, we could see a tropical depression or storm form just offshore and actually move to the northwest. So that might bring some additional inches of rainfall to North and South Carolina. Doesn't appear to be anything more than a tropical storm right now if that develops. 2 small areas of development next to each other back over east of the Lesser Antilles. Though they are pointing in the direction of the United States, they do not look like long-term threats at this point. And then Tropical Depression 7 back over in the eastern Atlantic Ocean is expected to become a tropical storm within the next day or two. Actually, the current forecast from the National Hurricane Center does call for this to become a tropical storm as we go through Thursday. After that, it's going to be a tropical storm the entire time. Now, obviously, this looks very ominous because the cone of uncertainty does include a pretty large area here. It could go literally anywhere, but I do think this will more than likely turn out to the north. But even then, it could still go west, so we're going to have to watch this closely. But as of right now, it does not look to be any major concern to the United States, at least for now. Beyond today and tomorrow, the weather is going to get interesting across the entire lower 48. Right now, we do have troughing that is currently in place over the Pacific Northwest, and that's allowing for some severe weather for today back over in Montana and the Dakotas. That'll eventually move into Canada and kind of become irrelevant for the United States as we go into the weekend. Things will get interesting, though, next week. We're going to probably at least have 1, if not 2, large-scale troughs move over the Rocky Mountains in the middle of next week, and this could pose our next threat for legitimate severe weather in the central and northern plains and perhaps even into the Midwest. The European model does indicate the first trough will be more of a concern for the northern and central plains on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then the behind that, as we go into Thursday and a Friday of next week, indicates another large-scale trough developing. This one could be a little bit more of a concern for the remainder of the northern plains and perhaps even back through the Midwest. Now, granted, again, it's still pretty far out, things could change, but definitely keeping a very close eye on that. So over the next 48 hours, rain will continue. Trough will start to weaken over in the Ohio Valley. We'll still watch for plenty of showers and thunderstorms in the southeast through the weekend. Nothing really new there, to be honest, from recently. As we go into next week, we'll be watching for maybe some sort of tropical development near the Carolinas, but again, no guarantee on that. The European model not really showing much of anything there. By Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, that'll be our next chance for some severe weather in the central and northern plains. And then as we go into the later half of the week, as of right now, the main concern will be this first trough, but we could see one behind that try to bring another round for severe weather. On the flip side of things stay quiet in Texas and even back into the Northeast. Things will stay relatively dry, quiet, and really uneventful for this time of the year. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.